All right. I would like to start. You know, I picked on the title, is it religious or secular, Yom HaAtzmaut? Number one, I call it Chag HaAtzmaut. Chag, like Chag HaSukkot, Chag HaPesach, Chag HaShavuot. It's more than just a day. In America, in the American Constitution, we call it Independence Day. And I think it should be called with us the Independence Chag HaAtzmaut, the holiday, the holy holiday of the independence of the State of Israel. As I mentioned before, assembled a lot of material to justify a point that I wanted to make. I can say right away from the beginning, at the outset, that to me and to many of us, Chag HaAtzmaut is a religious holiday. I'm going to read out for you quite a few quotations, and I will begin with the quotation from Rav Kook, Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen Kook. Rav Kook was the first rabbi of Eretz Israel, even prior to the State of Israel. And I found an English translation to that, and let me read the translation immediately. It appears also, there is now the Koren. They issued a special machzor for Chag HaAtzmaut. And the translation is as follows. The state, here is what Rav Kook said. In his book, Orot HaKodesh, the Holy Lights, about morality and ethics. The state is not the highest happiness. This may be said of any ordinary state, which does not rise to any higher value than that of a great welfare state, which has many ideals, the crowning glory of humanity's being, hovering over it, never touching.
Yeah, I can hear.
But this is not of a state that is at its very foundation idealistic content, which is in truth the greatest happiness an individual can know. Such a state is in truth the highest happiness, and this is the state of Israel to be, because it was before the establishment of the State of Israel. The earthly foot of God's throne, for all its desire is that God shall be one, and his name is one, and this is in truth the very highest happiness. That is what Rav Kook said. So right away, Rav Kook looked at the idea and the ideal of the Jewish state as a state of ethics and morality with the belief and trust in God. In other words, and later on I will quote something that I've seen from Rav Herzog. Rav Herzog was the chief rabbi succeeding Rav Kook, and so on. Now, there is an order of services for Yom HaAtzmaut, which unfortunately is not being followed. In Israel, it is, but unfortunately, outside Israel, I am not aware of it. Sometimes, some places, once I did it in the yeshiva of Flatbush, it begins, and I recommend that you take a look at it. Psalm 107, Kuf Zayin. Hodu LaHashem ki tov ki leolam chasdo. We know that. Yomru geulei Hashem. May those who are redeemed by God, who redeemed them from bad countries, ume'aratzot, and from lands where he brought them all together, from east, from west, from north, umiyam, and from the sea. They wandered in the desert. They were hungry and thirsty. Vayitzaku, and they cried to God, and God saved them. It's a very long psalm, has 43 verses. It concludes, Mi chacham v'yishmor ele. Only a person who is smart, clever, he will obey it. V'yitbonenu chasdei Hashem, and he will see God's miracles. This is a Thanksgiving psalm where the Jews came out with God's mercy. There is a description of those who wander in the desert, those who are in jail, prison, sick people, and people who are in the sea. All of them are problematic because they are suffering, but then they will get out of all the problems. It will come to the days of quiet and rest, and they all will join in the song of thanksgiving. And so we begin with that. Interesting. When the state of Israel was established, when Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the state of Israel, Rav Maimon, who was from the religious Zionists, stood up and said the bracha of Shehecheyanu. He said the bracha of Shehecheyanu. That night, Rav Goren, who was already the chief rabbi of the army, davened Ma'ariv and said Hallel with the bracha and said also the Shehecheyanu. And ever since, I was one of Rav Goren's boys, so to speak. He was my boss in the army. I was only a lieutenant, and he was a lieutenant general. And so he was a great Zionist, and he looked, and I will soon talk about his philosophy of what the state ought to be and already beginning to be. Now, there was the first Rosh Yeshiva of the first Bnei Akiva Yeshiva, which is a Zionist yeshiva. Today there are so many. His name was Rav Neria. And he composed in that time, Rav Neria, I knew him very, very well. He wrote a book on Rav Kook, what he had to say about prayer. And I have it, of course, in my library. And he dedicated the book to me, Rav Neria. One day I'll make pictures and I will distribute what Rav Neria wrote. When we daven Ma'ariv on Chanukah and on Purim, we say Al Anisim, about the miracle. And we thank you, God, for the miracles, the redemption, the mighty deeds that we say always, the salvation and the victories in battle which you performed for our ancestors in those days at this time. And then he composed a similar, like we have Bimei Mordechai Esther, and we have on Chanukah, he composed a most beautiful and timely prayer, and they have inserted it in the Machzor that the Koren came out. And I'll read you just a few because it's quite long, and I want to move on with my material. When the armies of the Middle East rose up against your people Israel and sought to destroy, slay, and exterminate the inhabitants of your land, young and old, children and women, and among them those who had survived the sword and were saved from the horror of your enemies' flames, one from a city, two from a family, hoping to find a resting place for the soles of their feet in your land that you had promised them. And he goes on, and it's just a most beautiful prayer. I said it last night in the middle of the Shmona Esrei. In the middle of Shmona Esrei, the Amidah, I said that prayer. There is another version, but I don't want to go into it at the moment. Now, when we conclude the davening, the chief rabbinate of Israel at that time was Rav Herzog. They said that we say Good Yontef or Chag Sameach. We should say Moadim lesimcha legeula shleima. May it be a happy Yontef for a full redemption.
Redemption.
Full redemption. A man from Israel who is faithful to his people, whether he lives in the land of Israel or in the diaspora, who seeks to understand what happened and to judge what is happening now, has to, in an ideological way, has to translate to himself the two ingredients that are the ingredients of Jewish life today in the state of Israel. And there are 2 points. One is Yahadut, Judaism, and the other one is Tzionut, Zionism. Now, who was the first Zionist? Abraham, our forefather. Yehoshua, with his wars in Eretz Israel, was a Zionist. The kings, the prophets, the priests, the ministers, they were all faithful to God. So therefore, I believe, now let me read you some sayings which
Your screen is frozen.
I'll call him.
I find so exciting that almost each time I...
Excuse me, your screen, you're frozen.
Hello, did something happen there?
Yes, so the Cantor screen is frozen. We've lost connection.
Oh,
I'm calling him.
Yeah, Sheila said she was calling.
Okay, he's going to try to come back in again. Please stand by.
So, Sheila,
Yes.
I was just thinking, you know, this has been happening quite a lot with
Yes.
Cantor, and I'm wondering whether it has anything to do with his router or his Wi-Fi.
Yes, it does. And I had a conversation with him last week to call his provider just to tell them he's having this problem and they could help him with it. So I don't know if he was able to do that.
Because perhaps, you know, perhaps they delegate an IT guy. Perhaps he needs, you know, a stronger Wi-Fi router.
Yes, probably they could replace it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'll follow up with him to see if he's contacted them yet.
Because does the shul, does the synagogue have an IT person? Consultant?
That's me.
That's you. Okay, wonderful.
Which means it's not so good, but it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, because I see it's been happening quite a lot, and I asked my IT guy, and he said to me, "That's probably the problem is the router."
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So hopefully, let me see if I can help him get back in for now, and then I'll follow up with him to call his provider.
Sure.
Okay.
Sheila?
I think it's better now, is it?
We have
Yes.
you back. Yes, you're back.
You're back.
Hi.
Yay.
You're back. Good. Okay.
Let me continue. So Eretz Israel is we have our hold on it since our forefathers. That's the Talmud saying in Baba Batra. Number 3, God stood and measured the land. This is the prophet Habakkuk. God measured all the countries and did not find a better country than Eretz Israel. That's a medrash. Every Jew throughout the world has 4 meters on 4 meters in Eretz Israel. No, we have a stronghold. A land cannot be stolen from us. It belongs to the Jewish people. And that was said by the Gaon of Rabbi Nachshon ben Tzadok. The temple was destroyed, but the land is sanctified forever. Eretz Israel is holy more than any other country in the world. This is the land of the prophets. Heart and soul cannot be pure unless the people are there. Now, I'm sure that many of you have heard of George Eliot, that lady, the famous writer, the British writer whose name she gave herself George Eliot. Let me quote what she said in her book, Daniel di Ronda. She was a great lover of Zion. And she said the following: the purpose of those who establish the Jewish state, the new Jewish state among the nations, not easy to have the ingathering of the people. It only depends on the will of God, who can do everything. And God wants it to be state, a political state for the Jews who are dispersed throughout the world. But as a result of that, all the nations will enjoy. And this basically is the prophecy of Vaya be'acharit hayamim, the end of the day. Then the hatred will cease between one nation to another. the leaders of the Jewish state will develop a spark that will become like fire from heaven. It is the spark that is the hidden power. It makes the Jewish people become alive from generation to generation. Let us try from generation to generation, midor dor. Let us try to bring out the power, this wonderful, lofty power of the spark that is still hiding. That was said by George Eliot. I don't even remember what her name was. What was her name? Baron Benjamin Edmund Rothschild. I am happy to see the land that was like a desert, and it is on its way to become a state of Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. I will bring up my heart to the Rock of Israel, and I will thank him with all my heart and with all my soul, who brought us to see and to dream about it. Rav Reines, one of the greatest leaders of religious Zionism in Eastern Europe. It is impossible that Haredi Jews, the lover of Torah, should oppose Aliyah to Eretz Israel. If they will continue, the study of Torah will disappear. Our existence is in danger. This is an opportunity that with God's help, there will be a spiritual revolution in Eretz Israel only through the establishment of the new state. That was Rav Reines. Herzl, a country with real Jewish spirituality. This is a very strong idea in Judaism to bring and to establish all those who are disagreeing, language-wise, social-wise, state-wise, and religious-wise. That was Herzl who said that, and he was not. And was not a very religious man, but he grasped it, he understood. More than that, in the year 1211, 13th century, beginning of 13th century, 300 rabbis from France and England came to settle in Israel. In 1492, a lot of Sfaradim came. In 1701 came Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. If you go down to the Kotel from Yerushalayim, there is the shul Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. It's been now fixed. The Hasidim came on Aliyah. The disciples of the Gaon of Vilna came. And the Biluim, Beit Yaakov Lechu V'Nelcha, the house of Jacob, let's go, in 1882.
Right.
And then was the gathering of the Galuyot, of the Golos, with the establishment of the state. Who can forget that when the Yemenites were flown to Eretz Israel, to the land of Israel, to the state of Israel, they said that they quoted from the Bible, Al Kanfei Nisharim, on the wings of Nesher. Shows what is a Nesher? What?
Eagle.
Eagle on the liver. Thank you, Claire and Beatrice. and when they were flying and getting into the plane itself, they call it Marvad Aksamim. No, it's called Marvad. It's the carpet of something that is impossible.
The magic carpet.
Magic carpet. Yeah.
Ben Gurion said, what is the Jewish mandate on the land? The Tanakh, the Bible. Ben Gurion, Jabotinsky, we will always be the majority in the land of Israel, which will be our state according to our religion. Pesach and Atzmaut are national holidays, traditional, and what is the symbol of the state of Israel? When they were looking for one, it was not difficult. It's the lamp, the menorah. And then a lot of poems, a lot of songs were composed. For example, Me'al Pisgat Har Hatzofim, from the top of the Mount Scopus, I look at you, Yerushalayim. Me'al Pisgat Har Hatzofim, Eshtachave lach apayim. Me'al Pisgat Har Hatzofim, Shalom lach Yerushalayim. Me'adorot chalamti alayich, lizkot lirot be'or panayich, Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, ha'iri panayich livene, and so on and so forth. What a beautiful song, and it's not a religious, but what is the center of the Yerushalayim? Now, you know, the son of Rav Kook was a Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, who was the head of the yeshiva, who took it over, of course, from his father, the yeshiva in Yerushalayim. And he said that it is incumbent upon us to increase in happiness on Yom Ha'atzmaut. He says, this is the beginning of the redemption. The eye is open. We are in the middle of the redemption. And he added that the beginning of the redemption already started 100 years ago. So if he said that 1948, 49, 50, and he said 100 years before, and today it's 73 years, and we are talking about 173 years ago was the beginning of the redemption. He says the state is the most important level in the process of the Shekhinah, that God returns to Zion. We know that Ezra and Nehemiah came on Aliyah and they established the second temple. Meshorerim u'meshorerot, men and women were singing. Rashi says on that, Shehayu olim besimcha le'eretz Yisrael. They were coming on Aliyah with simcha, with happiness to Eretz Yisrael, because God is returning to Zion with the renewal of Jewish sovereignty, Israeli sovereignty. This is a simcha because of the establishment of the state. The state is completely holy. We say in the bracha Machazir Shechinato leTzion. This morning when I davened in our shul, I made a big thing of a Machazir Shechinato leTzion. Oh yes, every country, and Israel also has problems, but as they say in Yiddish, Kleinigkeit, Pakim Ktanim, it's little things. This is not going to disturb and to upset the holiness of the state. Now, when the United Nations decided to divide the land of Israel, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook was not terribly happy. He quoted the prophecy in the Treasar, the 12 minor prophets. Ve'et arzi chileku. They divided my land. And he shouted, where is Hebron? Where is Shechem? Where is Jericho? Where is Ever HaYarden? In other words, the eastern part of the Jordan River. On that night, Rav Charlap, who was a very important Rav in Yerushalayim, came to visit Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. Both of them were shaken. And the Sedra of the week was what we had this week, Parashat Shmini, where it says, Vayidom Aharon. Aaron, after the sons with the fire, who brought the wrong fire. I don't want to go into that. It says, Vayidom Aharon. Aaron did not say a word. He was silent. But both of them suddenly woke up and they shouted from Hallel, Me'et Hashem Ma'itazot, Hi Niflat Beinenu. This establishment of the state of Israel came from God. It's a wonder. It's a miracle. It is just wonderful. And then they woke up and they were happy. In other words, they consoled each other. Now there was a Rav Meir Bar Ilan, in whose name we have the university, the Bar Ilan University. And somebody made a speech at the meeting of the Zionist movement, and that person said that the proof to say. So Rav Bar Ilan screamed out in Yiddish, and I'll say it in Yiddish, and of course I will paraphrase it in English. When they spoke about it, the politician only wanted to listen to the non-Jews. He said, Wer hört sie? Who is listening to them? Rav Bar Ilan, who was the son of Rav Naftali Tzvi Berlin, the head of the yeshiva, the Torah values, the holiness, the fearing the Almighty, it comes now for no more doubt, only clear thinking. And if you would have been in my shul this morning, we said Hallel with the bracha. I remember when I came to Fifth Avenue Synagogue, and Rabbi Rachman was the rabbi of our shul. And I said to him before Yom Ha'atzmaut or Chag Ha'atzmaut, so what are we going to do about Hallel? So he said to me, what do you do? I said, I say Hallel with the bracha because I follow Rav Goren. And he said, go right ahead and do it with the bracha, the Hallel. And so ever since, Rabbi Rachman and I established this Hallel, and whoever tried to undo it, I told them, no way. This is the tradition of the Fifth Avenue Synagogue, a bastion, always been the bastion of religious Zionism, and that's how it's going to stay.
Amen. Amen.
Rav Goren, thank you. Rav Maimon, all of them. God decided that we are Am Kadosh, holy people. Therefore, our state is a holy state. Now there was
Amen.
There was a great Rebbe, the Chortkever Rebbe, and he said the following, and a Hasidic Rebbe in Poland. A lot of holiness or sacredness exists in the Jewish people and the land of the Jewish people. And the day in which the state of Israel was established, this is the home of the holy people on the holy land. So in other words, here is a Hasidic Rebbe who differed, I suppose, with many of the Rebbes and spoke about the Jewish state and the Jewish people. Now, I want to quote another short saying by Rav Kook, the original Rav Kook. We do not we do not try to fall under the apikosim, in other words, those who don't believe in God. There are in the state of Israel things which are painful. Unfortunately, some desecration of the name of God. There are problems in the whole legal establishment of the state of Israel because a lot of the Roman law is being used. The Ottoman law system, the British law, and even the Hotanti law. He says, and what will be about the Jewish law? Mishpatei Israel. So he said that the value of the sanctification of God will not disappear from us, and slowly, slowly, Jewish legal system will prevail in the state of Israel.
Right.
The stronger we will be in the performance of the settlement in the land of Israel, because it comes from faith, we will merit that the desecration of God's name will disappear completely. Now, I told you before about Rav Goren that his name at that time was still Goronchik. When the first Yom Ha'atzmaut, Chag Ha'atzmaut, when he davened, he said Shechianu. So after davening, a man came to him and grumbled, "How can you say Shechianu?" So Rav Goren answered, listen carefully, Rav Goren answered, "It's okay, I have a new undervest. So if I have a new undervest, I can say Shechianu." Anyway, Rav Goren, something very interesting, it's worth mentioning. Rav Goren divided the history of the Jewish people into three parts. The number one is the first and second temple in Yerushalayim. Then the Galut in the diaspora, and then the coming of the Messiah. Today we are still in the Galut, but is it a new era? Yes, it is. Number one, we have redeemed the land from strength. We have the ingathering of the Jewish people. We would like to establish the Sanhedrin, the High Court in Yerushalayim, and the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. So 3 out of the 5 have been established and are being established. 2, so it's 3 against 2. This is the beginning of the Mashiach. And then he says, together all the Rabbonim from all over the world, together, who will agree to give smicha, to anoint other Rabbonim to become Rabbonim, will be harder than to bring the Mashiach. Let me repeat it. To gather all the Rabbonim from all over the world, to be together and to agree to the establishment, the Sanhedrin, and to anoint other Rabbonim, because that will go back to the times of Moses. It will be harder than to bring the Mashiach. And Rav Goren once told me that in one of his visits, it was before I came to America, in one of my visits, he spent a whole night until 4 o'clock in the morning with the Lubavitch Rebbe, and they had an argument. And one could not convince the other. The Lubavitch Rebbe was, of course, very much for the state of Israel, but he was not 100% willing to say that this is the beginning of the Messianic era. Whilst Rav Goren, who was a huge, tremendous Talmid Chochem, whilst Rav Goren did know what he was saying. In Haifa, in Israel, there was a very famous Rav from the old home. His name was Rav Meshulam Roth. And he said the following: it is a mitzvah, not just we should do it. It is a mitzvah to make Chag HaAtzmaut, a day of happiness, a Yom Tov with Hallel. Amazing. I remember Rav Shmuel Tuvia Stern, who lived in Florida and in Yerushalayim, and he said the following. I used to talk with him a lot. He loved Chazonos, by the way. He says, we have to correct everything so that we should say Hallel, because it was from slavery to freedom in Eretz Israel and in the Gola, in the Gola, in the diaspora. A miracle occurred in Eretz Israel, and not only in Eretz Israel, but also the Jewish people in the Gola, in the diaspora, have to say Hallel. Rav Unterman, whom as a kid I knew him very well, he was a chief rabbi of Tel Aviv and then chief rabbi of Israel after Rav Herzog. He was wonderful. I remember he used to walk from his office on Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv, and we kids after school in Bilu, so he chapped me and he says, come here, of course in Hebrew, young man. How old was I? 10? What did you learn today in Torah? So I had to repeat to him what we learned in the Torah. And Rav Unterman said, we have to say Hallel the same as Chanukah. Mishum pirsumei nisa. We have to advertise the miracles. And so Rav Goren Paskin and Rav Roth, Rav Stern, Rav Unterman all agreed with it. Now, the key to the redemption is the settlement in the land of Israel that should bring the state, said Rav Kook in those years. The beginning of the redemption is in front of us. Rav Koczynski in Yerushalayim, whom I still remember, not the old one, I knew his son, said, the new thing that is happening is the beginning of the flowering of the prophet's visions. And he quoted from the book of Jeremiah, "Vekibatzti etchem mikol hagoyim," I will assemble you from all the land. In umikol hamekomot, and all the places where I, God, pushed you away, said God, and I will bring you back to the land from where I sent you out. Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, spoke about the miracle of establishing the Israeli army, Hatzava HaYisraeli. He said the miracle of establishing the Israeli army by the new Israeli government created miracles that God helped them. God, Hashgacha, the high God did it. And God at that time decided to give us life through the Israeli army. And I remember Rav Goren Zatzal used to speak a lot about what the army was all about. Now, Rav Kahanaman, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Ponevezh, he said that the establishment of the state of Israel is a general rehearsal towards the complete redemption. The establishment of the state of Israel is a general rehearsal towards the complete redemption. Everything is with God's blessing. There will be many more. And therefore, Tyre Brider, he said, and therefore, dear brothers, let us get ready towards the complete redemption. So we can see from here, I mean, there is so much more. I would like to quote even Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch in Frankfurt, because he was, to a certain point, people regarded him as a non-Zionist, and he established the famous Austritt-Gemeinde in Frankfurt. And listen to what Rav Hirsch said. Is it possible to establish a religious lifestyle and a political state lifestyle? He asked that question and he answered yes. There will be here a harmonic, because there will be at least two voices or maybe four voices within harmony, musical harmony. There is nothing to tell us that there is a difference or disagreement between a religious Torah behavior and mitzvot to being a true, honest, faithful citizens of the Medina. Famous historian Gretz spoke about the state that this is a godly idea and a national idea. The godly idea is the monotheism, the morality. And only a successful, the only success that the Jewish people would have will be within his own special land. You know, we have, I want to tell you an anecdote. Something that happened to me years ago. I knew, of course, Rav Soloveitchik, and I knew also his brother in Chicago, Rav Aaron Soloveitchik. And he had the yeshiva, which he called after the town where they came from, and that's called Brisk. And he once had a very big dinner, and he invited me to fly to Chicago to sing at the dinner. Of course, I did not take a penny from him. He just paid for the ticket and the one-night hotel. And I arrived in Soloveitchik, in Chicago, and he took me aside and he said, Chazan, when you will sing Hatikva, but don't say Liot Am Chofshi. Liot Am Chofshi He said to me, don't use the word Chofshi. So I said, what shall I do? He says, Liyam Kadosh, to be. So I said, I'm Rav Soloveitchik, but this is the text by Naftali Herz Imber, who wrote the text. The music we wrote we won't argue about. The music is okay. One day I will give you a talk about Hatikva. So I didn't want to get into a fight with him. He was a Godel, he was a great Rav, so I sang it. No. You can imagine what happened. The Consul General of Israel was there. He came over to me and he said to me, what is that nonsense, what you did? How dare you change the words of Hatikva? So I said to him, first of all, it's not nonsense. I think there is a lot of justification. The idea, Liot Am Chofshi, to be a free nation, is not free from Torah and mitzvot. It's to be free from the pressure of other nations in the Golan, to be free from slavery, to be free from trouble. He wouldn't go for that. So I said to him, you know what, why don't you talk to Rav Soloveitchik? He instructed me. In the beginning, I didn't want to tell him that Rav Soloveitchik asked. But then he went over to him, and did they have a fight in front of about 400 people at the dinner. But I'll never forget them. Never forget. Now, I would like, well, soon we will stop. Let me quote to you the great prophet, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in Spain. He spoke about 4 points about the relationship between Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, and the Torah and the land. And he says the following: the religion in the world is a result of godly abundance. And the Jewish people are those who believe in God. There is something godly in the idea of the state. Not only brainy idea, that's not enough. The human being, the Jew, has to absorb the godly issue in a spiritual way. Number 2, the Jewish people are children of believers. Within the Jewish people and their being, there is one important thing, and that is the prophecy of our prophet, as they were in the Bible. And he quoted Yecheskel, Hosea, Yoel, Micha, Tzfania, Isaiah, Amos, Yirmiyahu, Zechariah, Malachi, Obadiah, and Yonah, and others. And then he said, number 3, the state of Israel is the land of the prophets and prophecy, and it is in that land, in that state of the Jewish people that was and will be, where the prophecy was growing harder and stronger. Number 4, Torah. The Jewish people do not only believe, but they carry the force, the godly force. The prophecy and the speciality of the land of Israel and the state of Israel create a very tight connection between the people and the land. This tight This tight connection will bring finally to the establishment of the state of Israel. I just wanted to mention perhaps another thing. You remember that it took the Vatican a long time to recognize the state of Israel. And it was much later that they did, because they said that they were they've been saying it, the continuation of the Jewish people, which is ridiculous.
Of course.
But the Vatican had a problem, because all the prophecies, in all these prophets that I just quoted their names, all these prophecies, what were they? They were fulfilled. In Turkey, the Islamic Pasha understood what it means to be a nation that forcefully picks its right to remain in its land. And of course, the Declaration of Independence, speaks about it. I would like now to close singing for you. You know, we have a mitzvah according to the Machzor according to the Machzor for Chag HaAtzmaut, to sing Shir HaMa'alot, Psalm 136. To sing it in the melody of Hatikva, the melody of Hatikva. And I remember I said to Rav Goren, why? I mean, the melody of Hatikva He says, no, it has already, although it, taken from a Czech composer. One day, I will, when I'll speak about Hatikva, I will elaborate. But Shira Malos Beshuvados I don't know if you remember, and with this I can conclude. There was a debate. What should the anthem of the State of Israel? Should it be 126? There was a vote. Can you hear me? Oh, there was a vote, and Shira Ma'alot lost by 1 vote. Can you imagine if Shira Ma'alot would have been the anthem of the State of Israel? How beautiful. I have nothing against Hatikva, of course. But if that would have been the anthem of Israel, this is so beautiful. And of course, there is a famous melody. Shira Malos Beshuvados et Shivat with this melody, if that would have been the anthem of the melody they attribute to the great Chazan Yossele Rosenblatt. I have my opinion based on research that he made it famous. That is true, but it was composed by Pinchas Minkowski, who was a Chazan in the Ukraine, and big as it may. So Chag Sameach, it's still daylight. So for us, although in Israel Yom Ha'atzmaut, Chag Ha'atzmaut is already over, there are 7 hours ahead of us, but we are in New York and it's still daylight. So Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.
Chag Sameach, Chag Sameach.
Thank you.
So wonderful.
Thank
So
Thank you so much.
so
Chag
wonderful to
Sameach.
see you and to
Thank you.
thank you for the blessings.
Thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank
Marvelous.
you, Claire. Thank you. All the best to all of you.
Likewise.